The fall and vanishing of the voivode, there are endings that arrive without the clash of swords or the roar of battle, endings that slip in quietly like a shadow crossing the land at dusk. For Vlad III Pepi, Prince of Wallachia, the twilight of his reign came not in a blaze of glory, but in the suffocating silence of betrayal. After the campaign of 1462, Vlad's name carried across Europe. The man who had forced Sultan Mehmed II to retreat before the dreaded forest of the impaled. His enemies beyond Wallachia hesitated, but within his own borders, the throne beneath him began to crack. In the court, the boyars, those who had once bowed under his cold gaze, now exchanged glances in the candlelight. Gold from the Ottomans dripped like poison into willing hands. And in the south, a familiar figure rose to challenge him. His own brother, Radusel Frumos, once a hostage alongside Vlad in the Ottoman court, now molded into the perfect puppet. Radu came not only with soldiers, but with promises, stability, peace in exchange for Vlad's crown. The weary nobility, tired of war, listened. One autumn morning, as mist still clung to the roofs of Targovik, the news arrived. Radu was marching north. The messenger knelt before Vlad, breathless, eyes wide. Vlad stood by the window, looking out at the palace courtyard strewn with fallen leaves. The words reached him like the sound of fabric tearing, soft, yet final. Maps were unrolled. Fingers traced roads and fortresses. But no ink could show the truth that mattered most. Many gates would not be broken by force. They would be opened from within. And so it was. City after city yielded without a single arrow loosed. Vlad's banners came down, replaced by the red and crescent of the Sultan. Targovik did not fall to siege engines. It fell to the creak of hinges as its gates swung wide. Vlad left the capital under cover of night, not at the head of a great army, but with a small band of loyal men. Through the forests he had once made safe, they rode in silence, their torches sputtering in the wind, swallowed by the blackness between the trees. The days that followed were a blur of fortresses and flight. At dawn, from the high walls of mountain keeps, Vlad would look down into valleys stripped bare, empty fields that mirrored the hollowness creeping into his rule. In the end, fate drove him west, into Hungary. Perhaps he sought aid from King Matthias Corvinus. Perhaps he was lured by false promises. Either way, he found himself behind iron bars. Prison in Hungary was no ordinary cell. The stones sweated cold. The silence was so deep that one could hear their own breath like the echo of a stranger. Here, they said, Vlad spent his days whittling small wooden stakes and arranging them in neat rows, a pastime, or perhaps a ritual to keep the memory of fear alive. Years passed before the door swung open again. Vlad emerged not as a free man, but as a piece moved on the political chessboard. In 1476, he reclaimed his throne, but it was a throne stripped of its power. The loyalty that once bound Wallachia to him had grown as thin as morning mist. Less than a year later, the darkness claimed him. No chronicler recorded the exact night he last held a sword, or the morning he last saw the sun. Only whispers remain that he died in battle, that he was betrayed, or that he rode into the mists of the Carpathians and never returned. And in the stories still told, he rides on, a lone figure on horseback, cloak streaming, eyes burning like embers, moving deeper into the forest where no man dares follow. Death, disappearance, and the mystery of the tomb. Death is supposed to bring clarity. It should be the final line in a man's story, a date, a place, a cause. But for Vlad the Third Pepi, Prince of Wallachia, that line has never been written. Instead, his ending exists only in fragments, scattered like bones, whispered like curses, each piece telling a different tale. The many deaths of Vlad the Impaler. The chronicles do not agree. Some place his death in the bleak winter of 1476, on a battlefield near Bucharest, as snow fell in sheets over a killing ground of steel and mud. They say he was outnumbered, surrounded by a force that included not only Ottoman soldiers, but Wallachian deserters, men who had once sworn fealty, now eager to see his blood spill into the frozen earth. In this version, Vlad fought like a man already condemned, cutting down attacker after attacker until the weight of bodies around him slowed his blade. A spear found his side, a sword split his shoulder, and still, they say, he did not fall until the last breath scraped from his chest. But other accounts are colder. They claim his death came not from an enemy's hand, but from his own men. Perhaps it was confusion in the chaos of battle. Or perhaps, and here the whispers grow darker, it was planned, a betrayal years in the making, paid for with Ottoman gold, sealed in blood under the cover of war. Whatever the truth, the stories agree on one thing. His body did not remain whole for long. The head in the city of the Sultan. From Constantinople comes the most chilling account. Ottoman records speak of a gift sent to Sultan Mehmed II, a head severed clean, its eyes frozen in an unblinking stare. To preserve it for the journey, they packed it in honey, sweetness overwrought. When it reached the city, it was mounted high on a stake in the main square. Crowds gathered to see the face of the man who had once impaled thousands, now reduced to silence. One can imagine it. The winter wind curling around the sharp point of the stake, tugging at the long dark hair. The dead eyes looking down on those who dared meet their gaze, as if memorizing each one for some future reckoning. The body that became a phantom. If his head went to the Sultan, then what of the rest of him? Here the trail fades into myth. For centuries, it was said that Vlad's body lay in the monastery of Snagov, hidden away on an island in the middle of a lake. The monks there told of how they smuggled the corpse from the battlefield, brought it over the water in the dead of night, and buried it beneath the stone floor of the church, safe from desecration. When archaeologists opened the supposed grave centuries later, they found nothing but an empty pit or, in some accounts, bones belonging to neither a warrior nor a man of Vlad's stature. The second possibility lay at Komana Monastery, a fortress and place of worship founded by Vlad himself. It seemed fitting that he might rest within walls of his own making. But excavations offered no conclusive proof, just fragments, just shadows. The Italian theory then came, the strangest theory of all, that Vlad the Impaler's final resting place was not in Romania at all, but in Italy. In Naples, within the church of Santa Maria la Nova, lies a tomb unlike any other. Its stone bears the carving of a knight's head, circled by the emblem of the Order of the Dragon, the chivalric order to which Vlad's father once belonged. Below are the words Vlad and Balkani, strange, foreign to Italian, but hauntingly close to Vlad and Balkans. Italian researchers suggest that after his fall from power, Vlad may have been taken to Naples under the protection of local nobility. Perhaps he lived his final days in exile, a relic of a lost throne, staring out at the blue-gray waters of the Mediterranean instead of the forests of Wallachia. If this is true, then the man remembered as a scourge of the East died far from the land he fought for, a ghost in a foreign court, buried among strangers. The power of the empty grave, the absence of proof, has become its own kind of presence. A marked grave is an ending, an unmarked one is an open wound. In the villages of the Carpathians, there are still those who claim to have seen him, long after his death. A lone rider cloaked in black moving through the mist, with no sound but the muffled thud of hooves on the frozen ground. They say the air grows colder as he passes, and the horses in their stables snort in fear that if you meet his gaze, you will forget the warmth of the sun and dream only of forests without end. It is in this space, between history and nightmare, that the legend of Dracula breathes. His missing body becomes proof of an unending life, his vanishing the perfect stage for return. And so, the question remains, unasked in polite company but whispered in the shadows. Did Vlad the Impaler die at all? From historical tyrant to immortal legend, history has a way of softening men, of wearing away their rough edges until they are no more than a shadow of themselves. In dusty chronicles, but some names resist erosion. Vlad III Pepi, the Impaler, Dracula, is one of them. His legacy is not a clean record written in ink. It is a palimpsest of blood and rumor, fact and invention, and somewhere in the blurred space between the man and the myth, he achieved a strange kind of immortality. The man who was both hero and monster in the mid-15th century. Wallachia was a fragile shard of land caught between two great grinding stones, the Kingdom of Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Its ruler needed the mind of a strategist, the courage of a warrior, and the ruthlessness of a predator. Vlad had all three. To his people, at least to those who survived his rule, he could be a savior. He crushed the bands of thieves who preyed on merchants and travelers, so that a golden goblet could be left at a public fountain without being stolen. He enforced laws with such severity that even the suggestion of crime withered in the mind. But to his enemies, and too many within his own court, he was a terror beyond imagining. His chosen method of execution, impalement, was not only lethal but deliberately horrific. Victims were displayed on stakes for days, sometimes weeks, their bodies turning slowly under the sun, and stars, entire fields became forests of the dead. It was this spectacle, half punishment, half theater, that fixed his image in the minds of his contemporaries. The birth of a dark reputation. While Wallachian peasants might whisper prayers for their prince's victory, the Saxon merchants of Transylvania told a different story. They painted Vlad as a devil in human skin, sending his atrocities back to their homelands in vivid reports. By the late 1400s, German printers were turning those reports into woodcut pamphlets. One infamous image shows Vlad feasting at a table surrounded by the impaled, a cup of wine in his hand, his eyes cold, while his guests writhe on sharpened stakes in the background. These pamphlets spread across Europe, not just as news, but as horror. Vlad's name became a symbol of cruelty itself, a warning to children, and a curse muttered in the dark. Dracula and the birth of Dracula. The name Dracula began as nothing more than a patronymic. His father, Vlad II, had been a member of the Order of the Dragon, Societas Draconistorum, a knightly order sworn to defend Christendom against the Ottoman advance. In Latin, Draco meant dragon. In the Romanian tongue, however, Dracul could also mean devil. Thus Dracula, son of the dragon or son of the devil, carry an ambiguity that would, in time, shape his legend. The leap from history to Gothic horror. Centuries passed. The Ottoman threat receded. Vlad's life and death slipped into the dim corridors of history, where only scholars and local storytellers still spoke his name. Then, In the late 19th century, an Irish theatre manager named Bram Stoker began work on a novel. He had read travelogues about Transylvania, pored over history books, and stumbled upon the name Dracula. It was perfect. Stoker borrowed fragments of the real Vlad, his name, his homeland, his reputation for cruelty, and fused them with centuries-old vampire lore from Eastern Europe. He built a new figure, Count Dracula, an immortal aristocrat who fed on blood and could command wolves and bats. In Stoker's Dracula 1897, the Count sails from his crumbling castle in the Carpathians to the streets of London, carrying with him the night itself. His powers were supernatural, his hunger endless, yet his manner was refined, his speech cultured. The monster wore the mask of nobility. The myth becomes flesh readers were enthralled and unsettled. Stoker's Dracula was both alien and familiar, a predator dressed in civility, moving through drawing rooms as easily as crypts. The novel fixed Dracula in the Western imagination not as a tyrant of flesh and blood, but as a creature who could never die. Stage adaptations soon followed, and in 1922 came the silent film Nosferatu, an unauthorized retelling so eerily powerful that even today, its gaunt, rat-like vampire remains one of cinema's most haunting images. Then, in 1931, Bela Lugosi gave the Count his most enduring form, the sweeping cape, the hypnotic gaze, the faint Eastern European accent. From that point on, Dracula was no longer just a character. He was an icon. Every generation's Dracula. Each era has remade the Count in its own image. In Hammer horror films of the mid-20th century, Christopher Lee's Dracula was a towering figure of physical menace, his fangs bared in a crimson smile. In Francis Ford Coppola's 1992 Bram Stoker's Dracula, Gary Oldman's portrayal gave him tragic romance, a warlord damned by love, a beast driven as much by longing as by hunger. Comic books, television shows, and video games have all taken their turn. Dracula has fought superheroes, walked in modern cities, even been a reluctant anti-hero. And yet, through all these transformations, the name retains its weight. It still pulls shadows around it. The missing body, the eternal question part of the myth's endurance lies in the absence of closure. No one knows where Vlad's body lies. No grave has been proven to hold his bones. This void in history is a gift to legend. If there's no grave, there's no certainty of death. If there's no body, there's no proof that he cannot rise again. And so the stories persist, of hoofbeats echoing in the Carpathian passes on moonless nights, of a rider glimpsed between the trees, his eyes catching the torchlight before vanishing into the mist. Between truth and shadow, to historians, Vlad III remains a man of contradictions, a defender of his land who ruled through terror, a figure of order whose methods were chaos. But to the rest of the world, he has become something more than a man. He is proof that fear can outlive the flesh, that a name can become untethered from its body and move freely through time, changing shape to suit the age. And somewhere in the dark, between the last known fact and the first spoken lie, Vlad the Impaler became Dracula, the whisper that never dies today. The castles of Romania stand as both tourist sites and monuments to a myth. Bran Castle, though only tenuously linked to Vlad, markets itself as Dracula's castle. Souvenir shops sell capes and fangs. Yet in the quiet hours, when the crowds are gone, the stones remember. In the mind's eye, one can still see him, standing at a high window, the mountains at his back, the wind from the east curling around him like smoke. Perhaps the truest form of immortality is not eternal life, but eternal remembrance. And in that sense, Vlad has achieved what so many tyrants dreamed of. He will never be forgotten. When the mists roll down from the Carpathians and the night grows colder than the day before, some still claim to hear it, a whisper carried on the wind, ancient and patient, speaking in a language older than fear itself. It says only one word, Dracula.